The morning mist hung low over the sprawling Gloucestershire estate as Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews received the most unusual assignment of her 20-year career. The call had come directly from Scotland Yard's Special Operations Division, marked with the highest security classification. A routine security audit at one of the royal estates had uncovered something extraordinary, and now she found herself driving through the wrought iron gates of Rayfield Manor, a property that had been in royal family ownership for over 3 centuries. The estate stretched across 1,500 acres of rolling English countryside, its Georgian mansion standing majestically against the backdrop of ancient oak trees. What made this particular property significant was its connection to Queen Camilla, who had used it as a private retreat for years before her marriage to the then Prince Charles. The manor had been gifted to her by a distant relative, and she had lovingly restored it to its former glory, turning it into a sanctuary where she could escape the pressures of royal life. As Matthews approached the main house, she noticed the unusual number of vehicles parked in the circular drive. Several unmarked police cars, a forensics van, and 2 vehicles she recognized as belonging to the palace security detail. This was clearly not a routine investigation. The lead security officer, Commander James Harrison, met her at the front steps. His weathered face bore the kind of serious expression that came from years of protecting the royal family. Harrison explained that during a scheduled security review 3 days earlier, his team had discovered irregularities in the estate's inventory records. What should have been a simple audit had turned into something far more complex when they realized that several items listed in the official palace records were missing from their expected locations. These weren't ordinary antiques or artwork, but pieces that held significant historical and monetary value to the crown. The discovery had been made by Amanda Foster, a meticulous records keeper who had been brought in to digitize the estate's extensive inventory. Foster had noticed discrepancies between the detailed catalogs maintained by the palace and what was actually present in the manor's rooms and storage areas. Initially, she had assumed the items had simply been moved or were temporarily on loan to museums, but further investigation revealed a more troubling pattern. As they walked through the manor's elegant halls, Harrison pointed out the empty spaces where valuable items should have been displayed. A 16th-century tapestry that had hung in the library for decades was gone, leaving only faded marks on the wallpaper. Several pieces of Georgian silver that had been documented in the dining room were missing from their display cases. Most concerning was the absence of a collection of rare manuscripts that had been stored in the estate's climate-controlled archive room. The investigation had initially focused on the possibility of theft, but as the security team dug deeper, they discovered something that changed everything. Hidden in a secret compartment behind a bookshelf in the study, Foster had found a collection of documents that shouldn't have existed. These papers, dating back several decades, contained detailed records of items being moved from various royal properties to private locations. Matthews examined the documents with growing amazement. The papers were meticulously organized, with dates, descriptions, and locations all carefully recorded in elegant handwriting. What made them extraordinary was that they appeared to document a systematic process of relocating certain royal artifacts and treasures to secure locations during times of political uncertainty or potential threat to the monarchy. The documents revealed a network of trusted locations across Britain where items of particular significance to the crown had been secretly stored. Rayfield Manor appeared to be just one link in this chain, serving as a way station where artifacts could be temporarily housed before being moved to their final destinations. The system seemed to have been in operation for generations, with each custodian adding their own entries to the carefully maintained records. Harrison explained that the royal family had always maintained emergency protocols for protecting the most valuable crown assets, but these documents suggested something far more extensive than anyone had previously known. The missing items from the manor weren't stolen. They had been deliberately moved as part of this secret preservation network. The question now was whether this had been done with proper authorization and whether all the items were still secure. As they explored more of the manor, Matthews began to understand the property's unique role in royal history. The building itself was a masterpiece of Georgian architecture, but beneath its elegant facade lay a complex network of hidden rooms and passages. Some of these had been used during World War II to store artwork and documents away from the London bombings. Others appeared to be much older, suggesting that the practice of using the estate as a secure storage location went back centuries. The most intriguing discovery came when Foster showed them the archive room in the manor's basement. Behind rows of climate-controlled storage units, she had found evidence of a much larger operation. Computer records indicated regular transfers of items in and out of the facility, all carefully documented and cross-referenced with security protocols. The sophistication of the system was impressive, suggesting significant resources and careful planning over many years. What concerned Harrison most was that these transfers appeared to have continued even after Queen Camilla's marriage to the king, when the estate's status should have been officially transferred to full palace oversight. The most recent entries in the records were dated just 6 months earlier, indicating that the secret preservation network was still active. This raised serious questions about who was authorizing these movements and whether proper security protocols were being followed. The investigation team had spent the past 3 days trying to trace the missing items and understand the full scope of the preservation network. What they had discovered was both fascinating and troubling. The system appeared to involve dozens of properties across Britain, from remote Scottish castles to London townhouses, all serving as secure repositories for royal treasures. The coordination required suggested involvement from the highest levels of palace administration. Matthews realized that this case would require delicate handling. If the preservation network was legitimate and authorized, then exposing it publicly could compromise the security of irreplaceable royal artifacts. But if items were being moved without proper authority, or if the network had been compromised by unauthorized individuals, then the investigation could uncover the largest theft in royal history. As the first day of investigation concluded, Matthews found herself with more questions than answers. The missing items from Rayfield Manor were just the visible tip of what appeared to be a vast iceberg. Tomorrow, she would begin the complex task of tracing each missing piece and determining whether the secret preservation network was protecting royal treasures or facilitating their disappearance. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the pressure to resolve the matter quietly and efficiently was immense. The evening shadows were growing long across the estate as Matthews prepared her initial report. Whatever the truth about the missing artifacts, one thing was clear: this investigation would test her skills like no case before. The very foundations of royal security and the protection of Britain's cultural heritage hung in the balance, and every decision from this point forward would have far-reaching consequences for the monarchy itself. Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews arrived at Scotland Yard before dawn, her mind still processing the complexities of what she had discovered at Rayfield Manor. The secure briefing room on the 4th floor had been cleared for her exclusive use, and spread across the large conference table were copies of all the documents found at the estate. The morning's first task would be to begin mapping the mysterious preservation network and determining which royal artifacts were genuinely missing. Commander Harrison had provided her with a list of contacts within the palace administration who might have knowledge of legitimate preservation protocols. Her first call was to Sir Edmund Whitmore, the keeper of the royal collection, a position that had existed for over 2 centuries. Whitmore was initially reluctant to discuss security matters over the phone, but when Matthews explained the scope of what had been discovered, he agreed to meet her within the hour. The meeting took place in Whitmore's private office at Buckingham Palace, a room lined with priceless artwork and rare books. The elderly curator listened carefully as Matthews described the hidden documents and the systematic movement of artifacts from Rayfield Manor. His reaction was not what she had expected. Rather than surprise or concern, Whitmore's face showed what appeared to be relief, as if a long-held secret was finally being acknowledged. Whitmore explained that the preservation network was indeed real and had been operating with royal authorization for decades. The system had been established during the Cold War era when fears of nuclear attack or civil unrest had prompted the palace to develop comprehensive plans for protecting Britain's most precious cultural artifacts. The network had been designed to be so secret that even most palace staff were unaware of its existence, with only a handful of trusted individuals maintaining knowledge of the full scope. According to Whitmore, Queen Camilla had been briefed on the preservation network shortly after her marriage to the king, as part of her education about royal responsibilities and security protocols. Rayfield Manor had been chosen as one of the network's nodes not only because of its historical significance, but also because of Camilla's deep personal connection to the property. Her intimate knowledge of the estate and its hidden features made her an ideal custodian for this sensitive operation. However, Whitmore's explanation raised new concerns for Matthews. If the preservation network was legitimate and ongoing, then why hadn't the recent transfers from Rayfield Manor been properly documented in the official palace records? And why had the estate's inventory shown such significant discrepancies? Whitmore admitted that he had been troubled by reports from his staff about irregularities in the documentation, but had assumed they were simply administrative errors that would be corrected in time. The investigation took a new direction when Matthews learned that several of the items missing from Rayfield Manor were scheduled to be displayed in an upcoming exhibition at the Victoria and Albert Museum. The exhibition, titled Treasures of the Crown, 1,000 Years of Royal Heritage, was set to open in just 6 weeks and was expected to draw hundreds of thousands of visitors from around the world. The museum's curators had been expecting to receive the items from the royal collection within days. Dr. Patricia Summers, the museum's chief curator, was visibly distressed when Matthews informed her that several key pieces for the exhibition were currently unaccounted for. The missing items included a medieval illuminated manuscript that was to be the centerpiece of one display, a set of Georgian serving pieces that represented the evolution of royal dining customs, and several rare photographs from the early 20th century that documented important royal ceremonies. The pressure to resolve the situation quickly intensified when Matthews received a call from the palace press office. Word of the investigation had somehow leaked, and several tabloid newspapers were reportedly working on stories about missing royal treasures. The palace was preparing contingency plans for managing public relations, but everyone agreed that the best solution would be to locate the missing items and resolve the matter before it became a public scandal. Matthews decided to expand her investigation by visiting other properties that were mentioned in the documents found at Rayfield Manor. Her first stop was Thornfield Castle in the Scottish Highlands, a remote fortress that had been used as a royal retreat for centuries. The castle's current caretaker, an elderly man named Malcolm Grant whose family had served the royal family for generations, was initially suspicious of Matthews' inquiries, but became cooperative when she explained the nature of her investigation. Grant confirmed that Thornfield Castle was indeed part of the preservation network and had recently received several items from other royal properties. He led Matthews through the castle's ancient halls to a modern storage facility that had been discreetly built into the castle's foundation. The facility was impressive, with climate control systems, security cameras, and fireproof storage units that rivaled those found in major museums. Inside the storage facility, Matthews found several of the items that were missing from Rayfield Manor. The medieval manuscript was carefully preserved in a temperature-controlled case, and the Georgian silver was stored in specially designed protective containers. Each item was tagged with detailed documentation showing its origin, the date of transfer, and its intended final destination. The system appeared to be operating exactly as Whitmore had described. However, Grant's explanation of recent activities raised new questions. He reported that instructions for the transfers had come through encrypted communications that he had assumed were from the palace security office. The transfers had been carried out by individuals with proper credentials and security clearances, but Grant admitted that he had never directly confirmed the orders with palace officials. The possibility that the preservation network had been infiltrated by unauthorized individuals suddenly seemed very real. Matthews' investigation led her next to London, where she discovered that several private storage facilities were also part of the network. These commercial warehouses had been specially modified to meet royal security requirements, with additional guards, enhanced surveillance systems, and direct communication links to palace security. The owners of these facilities had signed comprehensive confidentiality agreements and were paid substantial fees for their discretion and compliance with royal security protocols. At one of these London facilities, Matthews made a disturbing discovery. While most of the stored items appeared to be properly documented and secured, she found evidence that some pieces had been photographed extensively, with the images stored on computer systems that were connected to external networks. This violated the strict security protocols that were supposed to govern the preservation network, and suggested that information about the stored treasures might be accessible to unauthorized individuals. The facility manager, David Chun, was genuinely shocked to learn about the security breach. He explained that the photography had been requested by individuals claiming to be from the palace insurance department, who needed detailed documentation for coverage purposes. Chun had verified their credentials through what he thought were official channels, but Matthews quickly determined that the verification process had been compromised. The investigation now took on a new urgency as Matthews realized that the preservation network itself might have been targeted by sophisticated criminals who had studied its operations and found ways to exploit its security measures. The missing items from Rayfield Manor might not have been moved as part of legitimate preservation activities, but could have been stolen by individuals who understood exactly how the system operated. Working with the palace security team, Matthews began the complex process of verifying every recent transfer within the preservation network. This involved contacting dozens of facilities across Britain and checking the authenticity of every communication and authorization. The scope of the task was enormous, but it was the only way to determine whether the network had been compromised and whether other royal treasures were at risk. As the second day of investigation concluded, Matthews found herself dealing with a case that was far more complex than anyone had initially realized. The preservation network was real and legitimate, but it appeared to have been infiltrated by criminals who had used its own security measures against it. The challenge now was to identify these unauthorized individuals and recover any stolen items before the situation became public knowledge and potentially compromise the entire system that had protected royal treasures for decades. The third day of the investigation began with an unexpected development that would change the entire trajectory of the case. Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews received an urgent call at 6 in the morning from Commander Harrison, instructing her to report immediately to Clarence House. Prince William himself had requested a briefing on the investigation, and palace officials had made it clear that this was not a request that could be postponed. Matthews had never met any member of the royal family in person, and she felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation as she was escorted through the elegant corridors of Clarence House. The meeting was to take place in a private study that served as Prince William's working office when he was in London. The room was surprisingly modest, with comfortable furniture, family photographs, and shelves lined with books on history and constitutional law. Prince William entered the room with the kind of natural authority that came from a lifetime of royal duty, but his manner was approachable and genuinely concerned. He had been fully briefed on the investigation by his security staff and understood the potential implications for both the royal family and the preservation network that had protected royal treasures for so many years. His first question was direct and practical. Were the missing artifacts truly missing, or had they simply been moved within the legitimate preservation system? Matthews explained her findings carefully, outlining both the evidence for the network's legitimate operations and the concerning signs that it might have been infiltrated. Prince William listened intently, occasionally asking detailed questions that demonstrated his deep understanding of royal security protocols and his genuine concern for protecting Britain's cultural heritage. It became clear that he was not merely receiving a briefing, but was preparing to become actively involved in resolving the situation. The prince revealed that he had been aware of the preservation network's existence for several years, having been briefed on it as part of his preparation for eventual succession to the throne. However, he had not been informed of any recent irregularities or security concerns, and he was clearly troubled to learn that the system might have been compromised. He expressed particular concern about the potential impact on Queen Camilla, who had served as an unwitting custodian for what might have been unauthorized activities. Prince William's involvement brought new resources to the investigation. Within hours, Matthews found herself working with an expanded team that included experts from the Royal Protection Service, specialists from the Art and Antiques Unit of the Metropolitan Police, and security consultants who had previously worked on cases involving international art theft. The investigation was now being treated as a matter of national security, with all the resources and authority that designation provided. The enhanced investigation team quickly made progress in understanding how the preservation network had been infiltrated. Digital forensics experts analyzed the computer systems at the various storage facilities and discovered a sophisticated cyber attack that had given unauthorized individuals access to the network's communications and documentation systems. The attackers had used this access to insert their own transfer orders into the legitimate flow of preservation activities. The cybersecurity breach was particularly sophisticated because it had been designed to exploit the very secrecy that protected the preservation network. Because the system operated with minimal documentation and relied heavily on encrypted communications, it had been difficult for legitimate users to verify the authenticity of transfer orders. The attackers had taken advantage of this weakness by creating fake authorizations that appeared to come from trusted sources within the palace administration. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, a leading expert on art crime who had been brought in to advise the investigation, explained that this type of attack was becoming increasingly common in the international art theft world. Criminal organizations were investing heavily in cyber capabilities that allowed them to infiltrate legitimate art storage and transport networks. The preservation network, with its high-value inventory and necessarily secretive operations, would have been an attractive target for such criminals. The investigation team's analysis revealed that the cyber attack had been ongoing for at least 6 months, during which time the criminals had carefully studied the network's operations and identified the most valuable items that could be stolen without immediately triggering security alerts. The theft from Rayfield Manor appeared to be just one operation in what might have been a much larger criminal enterprise targeting the royal collection. Prince William made the decision to personally visit Rayfield Manor to assess the situation and to ensure that Queen Camilla was properly informed about the investigation's findings. The visit was arranged with maximum security and minimal publicity, with the prince traveling in an unmarked vehicle and arriving at the estate without the usual ceremonial protocols. His presence at the manor sent a clear message to the investigation team and palace staff that resolving this matter was a top priority. At Rayfield Manor, Prince William met with the estate's staff and reviewed the security measures that had been in place. He was particularly interested in understanding how the unauthorized transfers had been carried out and whether the estate's own security systems had been compromised. His military background and training in security matters made him an effective participant in these discussions, and his questions often revealed aspects of the case that the professional investigators had not yet considered. The prince's visit also served an important diplomatic purpose within the royal family. By taking personal charge of the investigation, he was demonstrating that the matter was being handled at the highest level and that Queen Camilla was not being blamed for the security breaches that had occurred at her estate. This was important for maintaining family harmony and for ensuring that all members of the royal family continued to cooperate fully with the investigation. During his time at the estate, Prince William discovered additional evidence that proved crucial to understanding the full scope of the criminal operation. Hidden in the manor's gardens, security teams found sophisticated surveillance equipment that had been used to monitor the estate's activities over several months. The equipment was professional grade and had been carefully concealed in ways that suggested extensive planning and significant financial resources. The surveillance equipment revealed that the criminals had been watching the estate for much longer than anyone had initially suspected. Video recordings recovered from hidden cameras showed legitimate preservation activities that had been carefully studied by the thieves, allowing them to understand exactly how the system operated and when valuable items were most vulnerable to theft. This intelligence had been crucial to the success of their infiltration of the network. Prince William's involvement in the investigation also brought international attention to the case. Through diplomatic channels, the British government began coordinating with law enforcement agencies in other countries where similar art theft operations might have been conducted. The sophistication of the attack on the preservation network suggested that the criminals were part of an international organization with capabilities that extended far beyond Britain. As the third day of investigation concluded, the case had transformed from a simple matter of missing artifacts into a complex international crime investigation with implications for royal security and cultural heritage protection worldwide. Prince William's intervention had provided the authority and resources necessary to pursue the criminals effectively, but it had also raised the stakes considerably. The investigation was no longer just about recovering missing treasures. It was about protecting the integrity of institutions that had safeguarded Britain's heritage for centuries. The pressure to resolve the case quickly was intensifying, as media interest continued to grow despite efforts to keep the investigation confidential. Prince William understood that the royal family's reputation for competent stewardship of the nation's cultural heritage was at stake, and he was determined to ensure that the criminals responsible for this sophisticated attack would be brought to justice before they could strike again or compromise additional royal properties. The fourth day of the investigation brought dramatic developments as the expanded team began to trace the international criminal network that had infiltrated the royal preservation system. Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews found herself coordinating with law enforcement agencies across Europe as the scope of the criminal operation became increasingly clear. The sophisticated cyber attack on the preservation network was just one component of a much larger criminal enterprise that specialized in high-value art theft. Interpol's Art Crime Division provided crucial intelligence about similar operations that had targeted museums, private collections, and government repositories across the continent. Agent Maria Santos, who had been tracking this particular criminal organization for over 2 years, explained that the group was known for their patience and meticulous planning. They typically spent months studying their targets before executing thefts, often using insider knowledge and cyber infiltration to access security systems and documentation. The criminals' modus operandi was particularly insidious because they focused on items that would not be immediately missed. Rather than stealing famous paintings or crown jewels that would trigger massive international investigations, they targeted valuable, but less publicly known artifacts that might not be discovered missing for weeks or months. This strategy allowed them to complete their operations and move stolen items through international markets before law enforcement became aware of the crimes. Computer forensics experts working on the case made a breakthrough when they discovered that the cyber attack on the preservation network had originated from servers in several different countries. The attackers had used a sophisticated network of compromised computers to hide their true location, but careful analysis of the digital evidence revealed patterns that pointed to a central command structure operating from Eastern Europe. This information was immediately shared with international law enforcement partners. The investigation took on new urgency when Dr. Hartwell's analysis of the international art market revealed that several items matching the descriptions of those stolen from the preservation network had recently appeared in private auction catalogs in Switzerland and Monaco. These auction houses catered to wealthy collectors who often purchased valuable items without asking too many questions about their provenance. The timing of these appearances suggested that the criminals were already beginning to sell their stolen goods. Prince William made the decision to authorize undercover operations designed to infiltrate the criminal network and gather evidence about their plans for disposing of the stolen royal artifacts. This was an unusual step that required coordination with intelligence services and careful legal authorization, but the prince believed that protecting the integrity of the royal collection justified extraordinary measures. The operations would be conducted by experienced undercover officers posing as potential buyers for stolen art. The undercover investigation revealed disturbing details about the criminals' knowledge of the Royal Preservation Network. Intercepted communications showed that they had detailed information about dozens of storage facilities across Britain and had been planning additional thefts from other royal properties. The theft from Rayfield Manor appeared to be just the beginning of what could have been a systematic looting of Britain's cultural heritage if the operation had not been discovered. Meanwhile, the investigation team continued their work to verify the location of every item in the preservation network and to strengthen security measures at all facilities. This massive undertaking involved visiting dozens of storage locations, interviewing hundreds of staff members, and reviewing thousands of documents dating back decades. The process revealed that the network was even larger and more complex than anyone had initially realized, with some storage arrangements dating back to World War II. At Balmoral Castle in Scotland, investigators discovered one of the most significant caches of royal artifacts that had been moved through the preservation network. The castle's ancient vaults had been converted into a state-of-the-art storage facility that housed items ranging from medieval manuscripts to modern paintings by famous artists. The security measures at Balmoral were more robust than at other locations, which had prevented the criminals from successfully infiltrating this particular storage site. The discovery at Balmoral provided important clues about which items the criminals had been unable to steal despite their extensive planning. Cross-referencing their target list with the items safely stored at Balmoral revealed the full scope of what they had hoped to accomplish. The total value of their intended thefts would have exceeded £100 million, making it potentially the largest art theft in British history. Queen Camilla herself played an important role in the investigation when she provided detailed memories of her interactions with various individuals who had claimed to be palace officials or security personnel. Her recollections helped investigators identify several individuals who had gained unauthorized access to information about the preservation network through social engineering techniques. These criminals had posed as legitimate officials and used sophisticated psychological manipulation to extract sensitive information from well-meaning staff members. The investigation also revealed significant weaknesses in the security protocols that governed the preservation network. The system's reliance on secrecy and minimal documentation, while protecting it from casual discovery, had also made it vulnerable to infiltration by criminals who could exploit the lack of robust verification procedures. Prince William ordered immediate reforms to strengthen these protocols while maintaining the network's essential security functions. International cooperation intensified when law enforcement agencies in France and Germany reported similar infiltrations of their own cultural heritage protection systems. The criminal organization appeared to have been conducting coordinated attacks across multiple countries, using the same cyber techniques and social engineering methods that had been successful against the Royal Preservation Network. This revelation transformed the investigation into a major international operation with significant diplomatic and security implications. The breakthrough came when undercover officers successfully infiltrated a criminal meeting in Monaco, where stolen royal artifacts were being offered for sale. Hidden recording equipment captured detailed discussions about the theft operation, including specific information about how the criminals had gained access to the preservation network and their plans for future thefts. This evidence provided the foundation for international arrest warrants and coordinated law enforcement operations across multiple countries. As the fourth day of investigation concluded, the case had evolved into one of the most significant art crime investigations in European history. The theft from Rayfield Manor had exposed a sophisticated international criminal network that threatened cultural heritage institutions across the continent. Prince William's decision to treat the matter as a national security issue had provided the resources and authority necessary to mount an effective response. But the criminals' head start meant that time was running out to recover the stolen artifacts before they disappeared permanently into private collections. The investigation team prepared for coordinated international arrests that would attempt to dismantle the entire criminal network simultaneously. The stakes were enormous, not just for the royal family, but for the protection of cultural heritage across Europe and beyond. The fifth and final day of the investigation culminated in a coordinated international law enforcement operation that spanned 6 countries and involved over 200 officers from various agencies. Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews found herself at the command center in London, coordinating with teams across Europe as they moved simultaneously to arrest members of the criminal network and recover stolen artifacts from multiple locations. The operation, codenamed Crown Heritage, began at precisely 6 in the morning Greenwich Mean Time. In Monaco, undercover officers who had infiltrated the criminal organization provided real-time intelligence about the locations of key suspects and stolen goods. Simultaneously, teams in Switzerland, France, Germany, Poland, and the Netherlands moved to execute arrest warrants and search properties that had been identified through months of careful investigation. Prince William was present at the command center to monitor the operation's progress and to make any necessary decisions about the deployment of additional resources. His presence demonstrated the royal family's commitment to seeing justice done and protecting Britain's cultural heritage. The prince maintained regular contact with law enforcement commanders in each country, ensuring that the operation proceeded smoothly and that all stolen royal artifacts were properly identified and secured. The first major success came from the team in Switzerland, where investigators discovered a warehouse containing dozens of stolen artifacts from museums and private collections across Europe. Among these items were several pieces that had been taken from the Royal Preservation Network, including the medieval illuminated manuscript that was to have been the centerpiece of the Victoria and Albert Museum exhibition. The manuscript was found in perfect condition, carefully preserved by the criminals who understood its value and marketability. In Monaco, the arrest of the criminal organization's financial coordinator led to the discovery of detailed records showing how stolen artifacts were processed through international markets. These documents revealed the sophisticated money laundering operation that allowed the criminals to convert stolen cultural treasures into untraceable financial assets. The financial intelligence gathered from these records would be crucial for preventing similar operations in the future. The operation's most dramatic moment came when French police raided a chateau near Lyon that had been used as the criminal organization's primary storage and processing facility. The property, owned by a businessman with connections to the international art trade, contained a vast collection of stolen artifacts from across Europe. Hidden in climate-controlled rooms throughout the chateau were paintings, sculptures, manuscripts, and decorative objects worth hundreds of millions of pounds. Among the recovered items were the Georgian silver pieces and rare photographs that had been stolen from Rayfield Manor. The criminals had been preparing these pieces for sale through private auction houses, where they would have commanded substantial prices from collectors who either didn't know or didn't care about their criminal provenance. The recovery of these items meant that the Victoria and Albert Museum exhibition could proceed as planned, preserving an important opportunity for public education about royal heritage. The investigation also led to the arrest of several individuals who had worked within legitimate cultural institutions but had provided inside information to the criminal network. These insider threats had been crucial to the criminals' success, as they provided detailed knowledge about security procedures, storage locations, and the movement of valuable items. The betrayal by trusted employees highlighted the need for enhanced security screening and monitoring procedures across the cultural heritage sector. Dr. Hartwell's analysis of the recovered evidence revealed that the criminal organization had been planning even more ambitious thefts targeting major museums in London, Paris, and Rome. Their infiltration of the Royal Preservation Network was just one component of a larger strategy to systematically loot Europe's most valuable cultural artifacts. The timely discovery and disruption of their operations had prevented losses that could have been catastrophic for the preservation of European heritage. Queen Camilla played an important role in the aftermath of the operation by personally visiting Rayfield Manor to assess the security improvements that had been implemented. The estate had been equipped with enhanced surveillance systems, upgraded storage facilities, and improved communication links to palace security. These improvements would ensure that the property could continue to serve its important role in the preservation network while being protected against future infiltration attempts. The successful recovery operation had significant implications for international cooperation in cultural heritage protection. The coordinated response demonstrated that law enforcement agencies could work effectively across national boundaries to combat sophisticated art crime networks. Prince William used his diplomatic connections to promote new international agreements for sharing intelligence and coordinating responses to cultural heritage crimes. The investigation's conclusion also brought important changes to the Royal Preservation Network itself. Prince William ordered a comprehensive review of all security procedures, with new protocols requiring multiple levels of verification for any transfer of artifacts. The network's communication systems were upgraded with enhanced encryption and authentication measures that would make future cyber attacks much more difficult to execute successfully. The media coverage of the successful operation was carefully managed to inform the public about the threat to cultural heritage while protecting sensitive details about the preservation network's operations. Prince William gave a carefully crafted statement emphasizing the royal family's commitment to protecting Britain's cultural treasures and thanking law enforcement agencies for their excellent work in recovering the stolen artifacts. The criminal's trial became an important precedent for international art crime prosecution, with defendants facing charges in multiple countries for their coordinated theft operations. The evidence gathered during the investigation provided prosecutors with detailed documentation of the criminal network's operations, making conviction virtually certain. The sentences handed down sent a strong message to other potential art thieves about the serious consequences of targeting cultural heritage institutions. As the immediate crisis concluded, attention turned to preventing similar attacks in the future. The investigation had revealed significant vulnerabilities in cultural heritage protection systems across Europe, and governments began investing in enhanced security measures and international cooperation mechanisms. The Royal Preservation Network became a model for other institutions seeking to balance the need for secrecy with robust security protocols. Detective Inspector Matthews received recognition for her skillful handling of the complex investigation, but she knew that the real victory belonged to the international team that had worked tirelessly to protect irreplaceable cultural treasures. The case had demonstrated that even the most sophisticated criminal networks could be defeated when law enforcement agencies worked together with determination and adequate resources. The successful resolution of the case strengthened public confidence in the royal family's stewardship of Britain's cultural heritage and demonstrated the effectiveness of the preservation network that had protected royal treasures for generations. Prince William's personal involvement had shown that the monarchy remained committed to its historic role as guardian of the nation's most precious cultural artifacts, ensuring their preservation for future generations to study and appreciate. In the quiet aftermath of the investigation, Rayfield Manor returned to its peaceful role as a royal retreat, but now with the knowledge that it had served as the starting point for an operation that had protected cultural heritage across an entire continent. The estate's gardens bloomed as beautifully as ever, concealing no secrets now except those that properly belonged to the ancient stones and timeless traditions of the British monarchy.